Hi, welcome back to the new video in this learning C++ journey. So this is lesson 7. In this lesson 7, we are going to learn about classes in C++. So I am going to dedicate this lesson 7 for the classes concept only. So we will learn about classes in a lot of detail, and we will solve a lot of problems with the concepts of classes and all the other concepts related to it. So the reason why I am trying to cover the classes in much detail is that it will be used in throughout our OOP journey. So in object oriented programming, we will be regularly using all of the concepts that are related to the class. So when we use encapsulation, abstraction, then we will use it in inheritance, then we will use it in operator overloading, we will use it in polymorphism. So all of these topics are based on classes. So what I am trying to do is to make your guys base very strong in the concept of classes. Let's try to learn classes in a simple way as possible. So let's start. So first of all, what are classes? So classes are basically the user-defined data types. By user-defined data type, we mean that we use some syntax to design our own data type as per our requirements. In the previous lesson, lesson 6, we discussed about what are the primary data types, what are the derived data types, and also we discussed in detail the user-defined data types in C++. But I left out class in that tutorial because I wanted to cover the class in much detail. So let's start. So the first thing is the syntax for the class. So it starts with a keyword class, and also you will write a name. So whatever you want to name the class, so let's say we will name it as test class, as this is our first class that we are creating. So this was the simple syntax for creating a class. So we have successfully created the class. Now within the class, there is a concept that is called member variables or member functions. So I will write it down: member variables or member functions. So any functions that are within the class or any variables that are declared or initialized within the class, they are referred to as its member variables or member functions. So to declare a variable or a function, it has the same syntax as we used to do it in our previous videos, or you might be doing in your previous programming fundamentals concept, that you have to write the data type, then the variable name, and if you want to initialize it with some value, you can, and if you want to just declare it and it is user dependent, you can do that as well. So this is the whole same concept as we are used to do it in our main functions or simple functions as well. But here is a key concept about class. There is a terminology that is called access specifiers. And there are three of them. So one is private, another one is public, and the third one is the protected. So these are three access specifiers that you can use within the class. So what do they each mean, and what is the functionality of each access specifier? Now, the variables or the member functions under the private, they can't be accessed outside the class. So you cannot access those member variables or those functions that are declared or initialized under the private access specifier or private keyword. In public, they can be accessed from anywhere in the program. So if you want to access the class member variable or member function, and that is declared to be as publicly available, you can access them easily outside the classes in any function. You can access them in main function, you can access them in any other normal function as well. Now, what is meant by protected? Now, protected is used in inheritance, and we will cover this keyword in much more detail there, but I'll just give you an idea that they can be accessed in derived classes. So what are derived classes? We will learn in much detail in our topic inheritance, but for now, just keep in mind that protected members or protected members can be accessed outside the class, but only in the derived class of that very class. But the only thing that is always accessible and everywhere it is accessible, they are publicly defined and declared members. Okay, so this was a little introduction about access specifiers, and I hope you have got the idea about what actually access specifiers are and how many of them are available and what are their purpose. Okay. Now, first of all, to keep everything simple, we will start with publicly declared members or of our class. Okay, so you have to use public keyword. So I will just write a comment that we are dealing with the public here. Okay, so you have to explicitly mention public keyword in class data type. The reason for it is that by default, if you do not mention that I am declaring and defining the variables and functions as public, they will be considered as private and you won't be able to access them outside the class. So you have to mention the keyword public. So let's say I have a simple integer. I will use three data types here. One I will use variable 1, and another I will use character, and I'll say name 20, and another I will say string name 2. Okay, so in this way you will get the idea how you can declare the normal data types and how you can access them outside the class. So let's go and insert some values within this class. Now let's go and initialize these variables with some values and take input from the user. Now, before we take input from the user, here is another concept that is called objects of the class. Now, what are the objects? So, objects are basically the instances of the class that is created. Now, to access each and every function of a class, you need something. You like, for example, I will give you just a simple example. For example, there is a data type integer. So suppose that integer is our class. Okay, for now just suppose that integer is a class. But if I tell you that use the function of integer, like use the functionality of integer, the functionality of integer is what? 1, 2, 3 or +1, +2, +3 or 0. This is the functionality of integer, that it has the numbers that doesn't contain any decimal point. So how can you do it? The only way you have to do it, that you can declare a variable, then with the help of this variable you can access the functionality of this integer data type. So same is the case for classes. You have to mention the name, and here the data type name is the class name, so we will write test, and after that you will have to mention the variable, and the variable here is the your object, so it is called the object, so we will say object1. So now we have successfully created our object. Now with the help of this object, I can access all these member variables, and let's see how can we access them. So for example, if I want to take input from user and store it in this var1 variable, what I will do is simply write cin. We are used to it that we write cin, and the only difference here will be that we will write the object name first, and after that we will use dot operator. Now this dot operator makes sure that we can access all the functionalities of this class by this object. Okay, so if I write cin object1 dot var1, so what this statement means that get input and store it in the variable 1, and that variable 1 is associated only to the object 1. Okay, why I am mentioning here object 1? Because this doesn't mean that if I write var1 is equals to 10, that 10 value will be considered for the object 2 as well. So every object can have their different values unless you create a universal variable that is visible to all the objects, and it can be done only in a case when you initialize some value within the function. So let me just give you an example that I will write integer t is equals to 10. Now this t is equals to 10. If I write here object 1, let's say if I write here object 1 if I write here object 2, now these two are different objects, so this is object 1 and this is object 2. Now if I print out object 1 dot t, and after that I print cout object 2 dot t, both will have the same value. Both have the same value of 10. Why? Because we initialized that value by 10 in the main class, and this class is visible and accessible, and same for all the objects that are being declared for this class. Okay, so whatever object is declared on the basis of this test class, all of them will see these member variables the same way. Okay, so this means that if some value has been initialized in the class, it will be seen same by each and every object related to this class. Now this was about the universal, like a kind of a global variable for each class. Okay, not for the whole program. Okay, so what we were talking about that how can we access the value. So we talked that object 1, we will write the object name, and after that dot operator, and then we will write the variable name. So in this case I will write var1. After that we will write cin, and then object 1 dot name, that is our another variable. Now cin object 1 dot name 2. Now this is the way of accessing the member variables of your class. So I have separately accessed each member for this object type, for which, for test obj1. Okay, so for this object type I have accessed each and every member of the class separately. Now I can store the values in it, and then I can print the results as well. So we will print the result here. Okay, so just copy this, copy, and we will paste it over here, and just instead of C in we will write a C out. So C out, and then C out, and then C out. Okay, and we will write the endl here as well. Okay, okay, now let's run our program. Now let's say the first was the integer, so I will write 100. Then after that it was name, so I will write name 1. Then after that name 2, so I will write name 2. So as you guys can see that we have successfully accessed the member variables. We have taken the input from the user and stored our input in the member variables. So this was the little introduction about the class concept and its syntax and access specifiers, and also how can you access the member variables of your class. Okay, so if I have a member function, let's create a simple member function. Let's say we have a member function void print data. Now, what do we mean by member functions? So these member functions are actually such kind of functions that are declared and defined within our class. Okay, and there is another way of declaring and defining your member functions. That is the way that you can declare your function within the class, and then later on you will define the function outside the class. But for now, for the simplicity of understanding, we will just consider it within our class. Okay, so we will just create a simple function that is called the print data. Now what I can do with this print data is that I can access these values, okay, in a normal manner. So I do not have to write each and every object, because remember what I told you earlier, this area within the class is visible to each and every object same. Okay, so there is not going to be mentioning explicitly each and every object name within the class. So that means I have to write only, I'll just copy this code from here, copy, and I will just paste it over here. Okay, and I will remove all these object name. Now because we are defining our member functions, so member functions also knows that what is variable 1, it knows that what is name, and it also knows name 2. So we do not have to declare them separately. So let's have a look, and how can we access them? So that is the question. So as I told you earlier, the syntax will remain the same. So I'll say object 1 dot print data, and we have no arguments within the function, so it will remain empty. So let's have a look. Now first thing is that we have to enter our data. So let's go and enter 1200, and then we will write name 1, and then we will write name 2. So as you guys can see that we got the input from user and we got the output also printed on the screen. Now, what is the advantage of these member functions? Let me tell you. Let's say I comment this program here for just demonstration. I'll comment this. Now, let's say if you have two objects. Let's say if you have created two objects. Object 2. Now to take input from user in a main function, okay, so to take input from a user in a main function, what you will do, that you will write these line of 3 lines of code again here, and you will change the object 1 as object 2. Now what these 3 lines will do, this will take input from the user and store it in the variables of object 1. Then after that we will take input from the user, we will store it in object 2. Then after that, let's say I have test object 3 as well. So I will have to write extra 3 lines here and then replace the object name with 3. Now the code is going lengthy and lengthy, and as the number of objects increases, the code will get lengthier and lengthier. So this is not the efficient way, this is not the good way, and this is not a good approach to perform such task of taking input or performing some sort of calculations or printing your results. So instead of doing this, what we can do, that we can define our main functions. And what are, sorry, not main functions, what we can do, that we can define our member functions within our class, with the help of which each function will be seen by each object as it is. So we do not have to mention explicitly within our member functions that we are going to deal with object 1, we are going to deal with object 2, we are going to deal with object 3. Now that function belongs to your class, and the class is seen by each object same. So each object has the right to access that function, and it has the right to use that function as well. Now let's demonstrate that how can we use it. Let's see. So I will create a void function that will take input from the user. Let's say we will have void get data function. Now this is a member function, and I will design it such that it will take input from user. So I'll just copy these lines of code and paste it over here, and I will remove the object names as we are working in the class itself. So we do not need any dot operator or any object name. Okay, and we will write some text. Okay, so that text would be, let's say, copy, and we will write as paste. Okay, and we will just modify a code a bit so it will look much better. Okay, copy, and we will paste it over here. Then we will remove this handle as well, and we will write it as this. Okay, one thing is here that we have to write these apostrophes as well. Okay, so I'll write this over here. I'm just going slowly in these topics. Just want to make sure that you guys get the clear idea about these basics. Okay, so just don't get worried or just don't get bored. Okay, be chill. It's just 30 to 40 minutes of lecture, so don't worry. Okay, so we have got some text as well. Now what we can do is that instead of writing these 9 lines of code, maybe if you have 10 members, let's say we have 10 members and we have 10 objects. So what it will do, that 10 times 10 will be equals to 100 lines of code for just taking input. Okay, and right now here what we are going to do, with the help of function, you will just do it with the help of only 10 lines of code. Like 90 lines of code will be not written in your program. And also one thing else, that if there is in any logic or syntax error in the code, if you get it fixed for one object, it will get fixed for every object related to that class. And if you have some syntax error in separate objects explicitly taking input for each and every object na, so what you will face that you will have to solve each and every error for each and every object. So that is going to be really difficult work to do. So let's get back to our topic. So these are three objects. So what I am going to do, I am going to write object 1 and dot, I'll say get data. So the only difference in this function and the functions that we studied earlier is that we use the dot operator and the object name just to access the member functions. Other syntax is going to be the same. If we have some return data type, we can store it in a variable. If we have some passing arguments, we can pass the arguments. If we want to have some reference value, okay, so you can do that as well. So every concept is going to be the same almost here. Okay, so object 1 dot get data, then we will write it as object 2 dot get data, and then we will write it as a object 3 dot get data. Okay, and then after that we will say that object 1 dot print data, and then object 1 dot print data, and then after that we can have object 3 dot print data. Okay, and what I am going to do, I have some little mistake, logical error, that is object 2. Now what do we have? Only 6 lines of code, with the help of which I am also going to take input from user, I am also going to take out print output as well. So let's have a look. Okay, so variable 1, let's say 100, and we say name 1, we say name 2, then 200, then we say name 2, then we say name 3. Okay, then we write 300, then we will say name 3, and then we say name 4. Okay, so we have taken the input from user, and we have also printed out the results as well. So this was a little bit concept regarding the member functions and member variables as well. Now let me give you a demonstration of the private keyword as well. Now I will just comment this piece of code. Okay, I have just commented with this piece of code, and I'll just use for now one object. Okay, just to show you what I am going to do now. Okay, I will use the, okay, I won't use any keyword, because if I do not use any keyword, that means everything is a private. Now let's run our code. Okay, let's run our code for now. We will probably face an error. Okay, everything that we are accessing here, dot get data, dot print data, everything within the class, as you guys can see, is private. Okay, and we defined earlier that private members cannot be accessed outside the class. Let's run our code, and we will face an issue. Why? Get data is private within this context. Okay, so we have an error, and we knew that we will face this error. Why? Because everything that we are accessing here in our main function are declared as private members in the class. Now what's the solution for it? For example, there is a company that wants to hide its information. Let's say these variables are its information, so they don't want anyone to know about these variables. So what they will do, they will write each and everything within the word private. So everything has been stored within the private. But what they want, that they want to utilize those variables and perform operations. They want to let user perform some operations on these variables, but they do not want to show it to them, or they do not want those user to access these member variables directly. So what you can do is that you can keep the function as publicly available. You can perform your functions publicly, but you cannot access these things in main function. So if you write, let's say if you write a C in object 1 dot let's say what is here, the variable 1, let's say, just for simplicity and understanding of the program, you will get an error because the member variables are still as a private. This variable 1 is private and I am accessing it here in main function, so it will give me an error. Okay, you can see integer test variable 1 is private within this context. Okay, so I can't access it, but I can access it within the class. And as you guys can see, this is a really sweet and good concept. As you guys can see that we have declared these functions within our class. Okay, these are member functions, so member functions can have access to these private variables. They can take input, they can store input, and they can perform calculations, and they can produce the input. They can they can show the output as well. So what this code actually means now, that we can access these functions. These functions can be accessed, and with the help of these functions I can make use of these variables. Now let's run our program, and it's running. Our variables are still in private, but still we are having access. So this means that with the help of member functions, we can have access to our private members as well. Okay, but the user won't have a direct access to them. So we just quickly write name1 and name2 and 200, name11, name22, and then 300, then name 111, name 222. Okay, so as you guys can see that we have successfully taken the input, store it in our variables, and also show the output as results. So I hope with the help of this tutorial you got some idea about classes, and I'll suggest you to please concentrate on these basic concepts. You are going to need them. It's not only about C++ language. In any language, as a software developer, you will need these concepts, and these concepts are very useful for object-oriented programming. I have seen many students that they do not work hard in the beginning, just considering that these are some easy concepts, and when they reaches the hardcore concepts, then they put a lot of effort, but they still don't get what they are even learning about. Okay, so this was it for this tutorial. I will meet you guys and learn more about classes in our next video.